Good morning, YouTube. Ty Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Hopefully you guys are safe. It's been a crazy 24 hours from what I've seen. There's been numerous reports of extreme flooding in the Northeast, particularly around Vermont, around the capital city of Montpelier, where there's been up to about 5 inches of rainfall. I don't know if you remember this from yesterday morning's video, but we had a rare, and I mean very rare, high risk for flash flooding, which had the city square in its sights, and numerous other areas around the Green and Adirondack Mountains here. We can take a look at the rainfall totals here, and it's quite a sight to behold here. This is right outside of Montpelier, and we have 4.73 inches of accumulation here. So there's actually a very unfortunate situation going on there, as well as some of the dams are actually starting to fail and water is seeping out into some of the smaller towns as well. So if you have the means to help these guys out, whether it's by sending money or supplies, definitely would urge you to do so. Pretty gnarly stuff going on there, to say the least. Of course, there are many other areas that have received tremendous amounts of rainfall, and I'm sure they'll need help too. So let's not just fixate on one area if you are deciding to help. Just wanted to make sure I brought that up. But that being said, here we still have severe weather to talk about too, and there's still a little bit more rainfall here to go. There isn't too much beyond that point, thankfully. Storm should start to die down, but we do have severe weather set to go off here across parts of the northern plains here, and even parts of the Midwest. Main threat, of course, wind and hail today. Hail threat actually has a hatched risk in a 15% area. I may actually try to go live and do a hail stream, but I don't know. I'm trying to hold out on going live until the computer comes in. It'll be a few more days before that happens. There is a 2% tornado threat through here. Confidence in this isn't crazy high, but the threat is definitely there. This also includes Lincoln and Omaha in there, Rapid City as well. But for the most part, outside of that, a lot of these areas are relatively rural. I think Grand Island's in here too. Council Bluffs is in there, Bellevue, and a few others. But we'll be keeping an eye on this today. From what I've seen with the upper level winds here, I think the corridor is most favorable, I would say, somewhere around here. And this is pretty much from 20Z, which would be just before or just after lunchtime for a lot of areas around here, and persisting beyond that point into the evening. I don't expect huge amounts of coverage here, but right where these winds are starting to veer upward into a little bit of a ridge here, that's where, and beginning to go downslope away from the mountains, I think that's when we start to see that increase in tornado potential. Like I said, it's not going to be anything crazy. I can click a sounding, I will a little later, but as a whole here, pretty much all the way up until about maybe 11 o'clock my time, which would be about maybe 9-10 o'clock for you guys in the Central Plains. We have to be on the lookout for really all hazards of severe weather, but mainly the wind and hail. The lapse rates here I'm expecting to be pretty steep. So as a whole, we'll go ahead and look at the different levels of the atmosphere. It's pretty much a similar deal. I think the storm threat more so for Montana and parts of Wyoming is going to exist more so earlier in the day, from what I've been seeing earlier based off of this model. Because now we switched from the RAP to the HRRR here. And this is a pretty good model, especially looking at this level of the atmosphere at 500. But right around here is where I'm particularly interested in seeing the potential for tornadoes, especially as you dip this right towards the South Dakota and Nebraska line here. And then, of course, as we get later into the evening, we lose our instability. Cap builds back over towards this region as this area of stronger upper level winds comes in. So like I said, it's going to be it could be a lengthy period potential for severe weather, but however, the ceiling isn't too high, which is good news to be had there. Go look at the mid levels, and it's pretty much a similar deal across the board here. Things really start to ramp up by the time we get towards 22Z based on trends that I've seen. Somewhere in these pockets right here is where you can expect severe threats. Here's a marginal tornado sounding. Like I said, towards the low levels kinematically, nothing is too impressive here. This obviously isn't the most impressive area that I've clicked on either, though. This is more or less just giving you a rough idea of what we could see. Damaging wind potential is definitely high, and then of course looking at the lapse rates, which are down here. Once you get into the 7 and 8 degrees Celsius per kilometer, along with the downward cape of 1700 plus, damaging winds are pretty likely. Hail is pretty likely. There's a hail analog here where we're seeing baseball size hail. So that being said, definitely something to be extra watchful of as we go further into the evening. And then of course by the time we get towards 02 and 03Z, like I said, about 9 or 10 o'clock, threat starts to become a lot more limited, and here's a perfect example of that. Convective inhibition increases, and of course storms become more elevated. So the window pretty much kind of shuts off at this point. The lapse rates do increase, so the potential for hail probably will still exist for a little bit longer, but I'm leaning more so towards the convective inhibition winning out on this one, and pretty much kind of shutting off the severe potential at that point, or cutting it off, so to speak. So lastly, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the low level jet. Like I said, the numbers with these are not impressive by the slightest. There are a couple of pockets that will be worth watching, particularly right here off the eastern or southeastern flank of this. Maybe we could see something a little bit more impressive, but again, cap may come into play. Of course, as the evening goes on and turns into night, low level jet does ramp up, but like I said, timing is just not going to be ideal for any major tornadic events. That being said, we can go ahead and take a look at the moisture nodes that ends up developing across this area here, and it looks like a pretty notable one does develop as we head later into the afternoon. It starts out being over towards the mountains over here around Montana, and then really starts to develop further and strengthen, or deepen, if you will, across South Dakota and parts of Nebraska here. The richest moisture actually seems to be more so towards eastern Nebraska. We'll go ahead and take a little sounding from there. Of course, by this point, we're mainly looking at marginal severe weather. I think this area's threat is going to be more so into the evening. So I'm going to actually try to bump this along to about 17 hours out here. And there we go. A little bit more ideal, severe sounding, a little bit more closer to textbook, if you would call it that. But the mixed layer and the surface cape is pretty good with this. And then also the downward cape is pretty impressive here, over 1,000 joules per kilogram. Lapse rates are also pretty high. Supercell potential isn't that impressive though. The index that we see here is only a 3.6. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. A supercell can still occur, but it wouldn't be anything that would be worth writing home to about. But as a whole here, moisture is definitely not going to be an issue with this setup tonight. Really the question will be more so instability and the cap. So speaking of instability, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. So here is the mixed layer cape here. This is heading later into the day here, about 20Z. This is just after lunchtime. We do see some pockets here where we're getting up to about 1,400, maybe even up to 2,000 in a couple of spots. And it's here where we'll continually see severe potential persistent as we head just past lunchtime and into the mid-afternoon here. pretty much a similar story across the board like we've seen with the other soundings. Not anything high as far as supercell index potential. As far as anything along the lines of like energy helicity indexes, anything like that, nothing too crazy. But it's later into the evening where I think things could ramp up a bit here. I do think the wind threat could be upgraded to a hatched risk, maybe even a small chance of seeing a enhanced risk over here towards maybe southern Nebraska. But even so, it's there's a little bit of uncertainty there. Like I said, the numbers with the decape on this in particular are ridiculous. The surface cape and mixed layer is really high, almost pushing 5,000 here, just under it. And then also the lapse rates are really high, and then this hail analog is at 4.5 inches. That's right at grapefruit size, if not bigger. So could be some big numbers a little bit later tonight. If I can, I might try and go home and stream this. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with work. But that being the case, oh wow, I think I jumped a little too far ahead actually. Yeah, I think I actually did. Sorry about that. But okay, this is today's setup. I thought there was something odd about that. I didn't see that earlier, but still, we do have potential for some large hail still, with the lapse rates being high for tonight. Some 7s and a couple of 8s here as well. Even then, the surface cape is over 4,000, mixed layers at about 3,500, so it's pretty notable there nonetheless. And then also, this sounding actually indicates marginal tornado risk. And kinematically, this isn't the worst that I've seen. I've seen a lot. This is probably one of the better soundings that I've looked at for tornado potential. There's very little inhibition to stop this if this were to get going here. Supercell index is a little bit better with this one too. But as a whole here, there's a decent amount of cape to work with here as we head into the evening hours. Could persist into the overnight for just a little bit, but by the time we get late into the overnight here, a lot of this is gone. And like I said, there's going to be a cap back building back towards the west here. So as a whole here, looking at cape and also looking at lapse rates here, looks like we're going to have a pretty active day. We got some really high values, like I said. In fact, some of these areas before storms arrive end up getting into the 9s here, which is crazy. And in fact, as we get later into the evening here, over towards western Nebraska, if I don't know, man, that might be some big hail if this were to actually end up under a thunderstorm. But we do start to lose that moisture by this point too. So I don't know. Even then, with those lapse rates, anything's possible. But I do think by that point, we're going to lose the instability, we're going to lose the lift, and these storms will probably start to fall off. But still, seeing these lapse rates, it's kind of like being slapped in the face here. Or these lapse rates are so steep, or as some people would say around here, slap your mom. Anyway, enough of me trying to be funny, even though those analogies kind of sucked. Nonetheless, excuse me. Nonetheless, ceiling seems to be pretty high for hail actually today, it seems. We could see an enhanced risk with that as well. But one other thing we'll go ahead and look at here, or a couple other things, because I'll go ahead and cover the rest of the country as well, is composite reflectivity. This is what the radar could look like throughout the course of the day. So it's later into the evening where we start to see these storms begin to fire. They're firing more so towards South Dakota here. I may switch this map over just a little bit, but potential still seems like it's pretty high for some stronger storms. Wind potential definitely seems to be high with this too. HRRR does have this developing a little bit further to the north than I would be anticipating. I do think there could be some activity over here, but this is very dependent on whether the cap breaks or not too. We're going to switch this up and go a little further to the north here. But here's where our storm activity is going to be originating more so. and it's later into the evening where things actually develop here as well. We start to see a couple of storms even over towards North Dakota here, and then of course South Dakota begins to take over here as far as activity is concerned. This could be a late evening, maybe a little bit of an overnight event. This is not going to be a long duration event, but I do think there's a chance storms could fire earlier than this. We'll see what happens here. Now, looking at the country as a whole throughout the course of the day today, make sure I get the time frame in there for you guys. This is looking closer towards current time. Already plenty of 70 and 80 degree temps first thing in the morning. We're definitely expecting to see some triple digits, especially across the desert southwest, and this is going to even stretch all the way into the panhandle here, especially by the time we get into lunchtime. Most of the state of Texas is going to see triple digits today. Even towards Denver, we could even see close to triple digits. In fact, over towards Pueblo, we may even see that. But we even could see some 110s over here towards the southern part of California, into these valleys here. And it's not really going to cool down. It's not really going to cool down till late at night, where we could maybe see some of these areas get down into 95, which is crazy to say that only 95 will be the low. But as a whole, as we head towards tomorrow, like I said, it's summertime, the heat's on. Make sure you're staying hydrated and making sure you're staying cool throughout the day. Then lastly, of course, take a look at what the radar could look like. We know our severe weather area right now for today. But any other areas, like I said, thankfully over here towards Vermont, rain's pretty much over now. Could be some pop-up thunderstorms towards the Gulf Coast, and maybe a little bit of increasing shower activity over towards the New Mexico, Arizona area. We are getting closer to monsoon season, but a lot of you might be staying dry today, so you may see a couple of stray storms. Hopefully these don't end up being dry thunderstorms or pyrocumulus, because that could increase the fire threat there. But that's to be discussed in a later video. But that's all we got for this one. After this severe weather threat goes through, it's going to mainly be an MCS, so we may see severe potential develop tomorrow towards the Midwest. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video, found it useful. If you did, you know what to do. Smash that like button, decimate that subscribe button, and also make sure you get the bell on to get notified of every video. Also hit that share button. That being said, though, this has been Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care and have a nice day.